time to go through the papers now with former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and broadcaster Claire Muldoon. Good to see you both once again. Let's talk in the Mail, page 8 of the Mail, David, looking at crime cuts, because Liz Truss says she wants police to cut crime by 20%. I don't know, how do you do that?
Well, the answer is, I spent 5 years as a Home Office Minister, you can't. First of all, we don't know what the level of crime is in our society. All we know is what crime is reported. What we certainly know is that people will only bother to report crime if they think there's some chance of something being done about it.
Or they need an insurance claim.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so, yes, that's a good point. And so basically, a lot of the time now, people have no real confidence in the police. And so, unless, as you rightly say, for an insurance claim, they basically don't bother. You know, it's the absence of grown-up discussions in this election that really bothers me. I mean, here we have Truss saying people across our country want criminals locked up and crime prevented. Yes, they do. Their chances of getting it from her may be minimal, but at least she set herself the right goal. Then she goes on to say, and this is this sort of spurious guff that actually offends me as a purveyor of spurious guff for many years. At least I thought my guff was reasonably credible guff.
Funny.
But, you know, yeah, but what we and our fantastic conservative police and crime commissioners have made good progress. Look, you either say that the country isn't doing very well in dealing with crime. You say the police aren't doing very well in catching criminals, and they're not. What you can't say is that the people who are elected to sit on top of that awful kind of ants nest are actually fantastic. So it's treating people like fools, and at a certain point, mature people will say, hang on a minute, if those police and crime commissioners are so fantastic, why have we got a problem? And of course, the answer is we have a problem because the problem of crime is more intractable than, you know, sad little careerists like Liz Truss want people to understand.
Well, it's in the Financial Times, Claire, Met Chief's policing skills put to the test. Yeah, because he's facing a toxic force that he has to take over. Statistics from here in terms of crime reported, 50% of Londoners said the capital's police could be relied upon when needed most in recent quarterly survey by the Mayor of London's office. So we've got people who aren't reporting crime, we've got crime on the increase, we've got knives being sold to 15-year-olds in the country at the moment. And there was a study, an undercover reporter, age 16, went with the Mirror, was sold knives in Birmingham, London and Manchester yesterday, age 15. We've got knife crime issues all over the country. We've got people being shot dead in London. We've now got less than half the population in support or can feel okay with reporting crime and feel safe in the hands of the police, because we've had decades of police cuts. We've got increased levels of poverty. Where you've got poverty, you've got more crime, you've got an institutional, misogynistic task force in the makeup of the Metropolitan Police, I believe. We need to stamp it all out. In the Daily Telegraph, stubble trouble as Chief Constable tells every officer to smarten up. That's the start of it. I think that's quite a good plan. Start from the basics up, you know, make people presentable.
It's not not just a question of smartening up, it's a question of getting fit. You look at the average copper that you see on the street, 1 stone overweight, 2 stone overweight. I mean, it is a force that should have people who have athletic skills.
That's the way it used to be.
Running after criminals. They can run after criminals. You feel with the Met for some time.
Is that not a bit old-fashioned?
In terminal decline.
Is that not a bit old-fashioned? I mean, there's not a lot of running involved nowadays. There's police cars.
Just as well if they can't run.
Well, I mean, I know the point you're making, but would it actually make any difference?
Well, I think what you would like to see, when you see the police, they don't look like a high morale group, do they?
No, they're often on their phones walking around, but the studies and the research is there and the evidence is there to support. If you have got bobbies on the beat, crime goes down.
Yeah.
Okay? It's simple, and I think you take a bit on board from the the Metropolitan, sorry, not the Met, the Manchester Police Commissioner. Starting up, smarten yourself up, and let's move forward and let's get going with this. And also removal of personal phones, I think, would be a great thing, because then it would not entrap these toxic WhatsApp groups
you see,
that are going
that
around
is
in the
such a
mental
good
model.
point, because when President Dick discovered that there were WhatsApp groups peddling the most awful misogyny,
Yeah.
what did she do about it? She didn't actually say, as she should, no police officer should be using his personal phone in order to set up chat rooms with other police officers.
Yeah.
Because we all know, if you hold appalling views, there's a good chance you'll keep those views to yourself. But if you think the guy that's next to you on the beat, the guy you have a meal with in the police canteen or whatever, he has the same opinions, suddenly you can flaunt those opinions. And that's a particular problem, I think, for women.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely.
I mean, look, I get what you're saying. I just sort of think with things like that, I'm not saying what they were saying in the groups was right, but in terms of setting up groups, you can't ban people from having a WhatsApp chat, can you?
The police force is supposed to be a disciplined force, and anything that encourages them to say terrible things around the back of their superior officers and to take comfort from the fact that they can peddle awful things to their colleagues, I think that's appropriate.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a fair point. Fair point.
Let's move to the Times, shall we, David? Faltering economy fuels discontent in China.
Yes, you see, why do people buy newspapers? Increasingly they don't, of course. They buy newspapers for the news, but mainly that news is already out of date by the time you get to read it. So for me, the reason why one wants to buy a newspaper is to have proper, mature examination and analysis of what's going on. And I always look to Roger Boyes in the Times. He's a very good commentator on a part of the world that's always interested me, the Far East. And what he says is that, while the Chinese are preparing to anoint Chairman Xi into, Mao without the personality, but giving him lifelong powers and so on, he is pointing out that China are not actually doing very well on most of the indicators, particularly appalling the indicators for education and so on. But also, he very tellingly quotes some of the things that are said, for instance, by Deng Xiaoping, who was, of course, probably the most highly regarded of all of the Chinese leaders. He set out 4 guiding principles of communist leadership: no excessive concentration of power, a clear separation of the party from the technocratic functions of government, and thirdly, the promotion of the young to prevent a succession crisis, and no fawning praise for the leader.
Right.
I mean, Xi falls into every one of those.
Of those pillars.
And I just think that's the kind of thing. I know it's awful. I shouldn't want to only read about, some poor girl collapsing while hosting some third-rate debate between the Conservative leadership candidates. But when I'm ready to move on from that, which I am before I even start reading it most of the time, I quite want to read someone like Roger Boyes, because he tells me what I need to know about a very important part of the world. And I think to myself, this is good.
Yeah.
And that's why you buy a newspaper.
Yeah, it's getting that in-depth analysis, isn't it?
Well, that's what you need, and I think that's the only reason now that papers are actually existing, because of op-eds, opinion pieces that are being done by seasoned journalists that do give an often frank and full and well-researched, evidenced and documentation of the facts, which we just don't get. Well, let's look at the front page of the Times, shall we?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I hate to jump in.
Oh my goodness, please do.
But no, there was a matter of more importance that struck me.
What was that?
Someone who is a keen gardener. Has it's the hosepipe ban.
Right.
Are we going to have a... I know you think it's crackers, Rosie, but I've got lawns to look after.
Yeah.
And roses, newly planted roses to care for.
Well, just put some more in your roses then. I think that'll help, because you're not going to be able to water them for much longer. We are saying that we're to limit our water use UK-wide. Apparently there's parts of the southeast in London that are drier than South Sudan and Jerusalem. Can you believe it?
No.
But if you
Well, that's
Not
what that.
really.
Well, believe it, because it's written here in the mirror.
I think
But
the
even so,
idea
it might
of
be
these,
true,
these
yeah.
warnings is to say if we all use a little bit less, we maybe won't have to have these bans.
Oh, Rosie, come on.
But that is the idea, isn't it? What does it say there?
I mean, it's not-
Limit your water use.
Drought summit as fears of restrictions soar. I mean, they say that the first hosepipe ban was in 1976. I remember, oh, yeah, okay, we've had them then, but I'm sure we've had them more or less every single year since that,
That's
bar the
good,
past
yeah.
couple of years. And you,
Yeah.
but the population, the reason we are having them apparently is because the population in the 70s was 50 million. Now we're 76 as a UK country, and we're just not built to
not-
deal
it-
with
What is it
it.
you're cross about? Is it the fact that we don't have the infrastructure to cope, so therefore we have to have the ban? Do you think the ban isn't a useful way to deal with the problem?
I think I'm cross because I'm mitigating actually in my amount of care for this. You know, people need to take care of themselves. We need to use water. It's a resource. It's a primal resource that we all fundamentally need to live. But you know, come on, we must have evolved from the 70s in order for us to actually go about our normal life.
Depends. Are they going to go on about a national issue
They are.
here? Because if you're anywhere north of about Nottingham, then it's actually not been that dry.
There's even a national drought group now.
there.
Yeah, and maybe you should join it, Rosie. Stuart Colville of Water UK said Water's Worth Saving campaign provided people with helpful hints on tips on how to do their bit. England and Wales have had the driest spell since 1976, and now farmers are now calling for the government to ensure water for food is prioritised. I get that.
If anyone else tells me to put a brick in my cistern,
I just think
Why would you
we're
put
being.
a brick through your window? Yes, in your cistern. Why do you put a brick?
in your cistern, if you put a brick in your cistern, then it deflates the amount of water that you use to fill your toilet tank.
But what really is
Resistant,
the,
yeah.
what really is the problem with being asked to use a little bit less
It's
water?
worth getting up early to learn stuff like
It
that.
is.
Yeah.
Rosie,
What's
ask the
special
question
about it?
again.
There's
We'll still blank it.
I don't understand.
Well, there's nothing wrong with using a little bit less, but it's when it starts impinging on things like we all have to let our gardens dry to a crisp.
Yeah, and there was 10
Well, if there isn't enough water, then yes.
Well, so, yeah, we'll get back to the old slogans, you know, save water, bath with a friend, that kind of thing.
Not all bad news then, David.
No, that's what I was thinking.
I just, considering everything else, I can't get that cross about it, really.
But we're just being told to do everything. Everything's being limited to the minutiae of its life. You know, and that makes me cross.
Well,
We
I
shouldn't
know-
have to.
I need an expert, and so there will be an expert watching, I'm sure.
Sure there's an expert on Twitter.
That can get in touch and let me know. But water is the one resource it's a natural resource that we
Yeah.
never lose. We never lose. We're never going to actually run out of water
No,
because
but we're in
it's
danger of
there.
losing quite a bit. I mean, I'm quite shocked actually, as someone who recently moved back my place where I grew up down there in Dorset, and this summer our property it makes the Sahara look a really well-watered place. I mean, it is awful, and the level of water in our pond has fallen by about 12 to 18 inches, and you suddenly realise this is quite serious, actually, not because anyone gives a what's it about my pond, and I could live with a slightly smaller pond than I had before, but what it does do is cause all kinds of trouble for agriculture, for the growth
Yes.
of crops, and for the, for farm animals.
I've got to ask, David, have you got a duck house in the middle of it?
No, and I tell you, everything, I remember the duck house. Peter Viggers.
Oh, Peter Viggers, that's right.
Remember, you see, this is a trip down memory lane.
It is.
I see people are reaching for the off button in droves, but the only thing I would say is that, if you want a duck house and pay for it yourself, that's all right. It was having the duck house paid for by the taxpayer that perhaps crossed a line even for most politicians.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Look, we've got to leave it there. Claire, David, thank you very much indeed.